Okay, we're gonna start. Welcome, everybody. This is the fourth and last workshop for the Game Creator 2015. The plan today is to have talk about basically two things: industry and testing, and then of course how to submit. And then I have a bonus material here, which is Nordic Game Development Prize. This has not been announced yet. I don't think so, but I got some information about this, and I'm going to share it with you today. So what we thought we would do, start with today, is to have a presentation, a short presentation from a guy that participated last year in Game Creator and now works for CCP, am I right? So we're going to start by welcoming Freyr to say, and you will introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Freyr Heffersson. I currently work as a front-end engineer in the web department at CCP. A year ago, my teammates and we participated in Game Creator. We had sort of an idea of wanting to make computer games, but we kind of we didn't really know how or where to start. So when we saw that Game Creator was starting, we sort of just went along with it and dove in at first. We started out originally with a group called ourselves Crying Pig Games, which later turned into Tiny Edifice after the competition, which was sort of the name that we were running with in order to try to get up our own game development studio running. We made a game, or we made a prototype for a game that was pretty, how do I, that's the next slide. Is this thing, does it work? Yeah, that's right. Yes, we made a prototype for a game called Pill, P-I-L-L, which was sort of a little idea for an educational game where the player would take on the role of a small pill entering the human body and fighting various ailments. The idea was sort of aimed at the target audience that we chose was sort of, how do you say, the younger generation and schools. And we sort of tried to theme it in a fun and interesting way. The team itself was, it consists of a programmer who doesn't know programming, a level designer who had never designed levels, concept artist who doesn't play computer games, sitting right there, two graphic designers and 3D artists. They had never done that before either. And a sound and music guy that doubled as a project manager, which was me. And this sort of dysfunctional team of enthusiasts, we just went in and tried to have fun. And we sort of decided to set up shop in our living room, and we spent a lot of time crammed together in a very short, very small space, doing whatever game designers do, game developers do. And we had tea, for example. And we coded, and we did graphics, and we planned everything meticulously. and nothing worked, obviously. But in the end, we went in with a fairly complete prototype, playable, 15 levels, which is what we set out with. And it took us to second place in Game Creator, acknowledgement for best level design, and we got invited to Nysköpunartorg here at HR, here at RU, yeah, later on that year, where we got these fantastic t-shirts promoting Game Creator. This was very fun. The game itself, we didn't spend too much time on the design. We sort of had an idea of how the mechanics would work, very simple. We had an idea of how we wanted the levels to play out. And we had an idea that we wanted people to feel like it was a complete game. So we spent a lot of time on making menus and buttons and functionality into the game, like little things like the purple stuff kills you, and the yellow stuff is slippery. We had checkpoints, flags, and stuff. This is very crucial to us for a complete game, and small tutorial system. But that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make a as complete prototype as we could, even though the graphics kind of sucked. Target audience, like I said, kids, happy kids who wanted to learn stuff. And through testing, and I cannot stress how important testing is, we found out that no, that was not our target audience. Apparently this game was better suited to a different type of personality. The hardcore gamer who really does not want to give up until everything is completed. And we sort of, from there, we learned that making games is hard work. It can be fun, can be rewarding. We had some struggles, obviously, along the way, but it was very, very interesting experience. The game design business is actually a serious business. We went to a competition called Atvinnu og Nysköpunartorg in Akureyri, sort of entrepreneurship competition. We took this idea, the game idea, and our company idea. We made the Tiny Edifice identity there, and we found out that during that competition that the business side of a game company is pretty, it's quite brutal. But don't let that scare you. It's also fun if you're into that sort of stuff, but don't make assumptions, back it up with data. Like, we thought we were making a game for kids. We found out after testing that that's not what we were making. Kids did not enjoy this game at all. It was too hard. It was too...
If you remember when we were here, kids actually did like it.
Yeah, there were a few kids who, they liked the idea. They didn't get very far. They gave up pretty easily. But yeah, well, with dedication, anything's possible. We got into this without knowing anything. None of us were really educated in the field of anything related to game design and development. But we learned as we went, and we spent a lot of time crammed together in a very small space. And just through sheer dedication, we actually managed to get this this thing together. And yeah, here we are a year later. I'm currently employed by CCP. I wouldn't say that my experience as Game Creator had much to do with it, although through the Game Creator experience I did meet the hiring manager at CCP initially. it was very nice when I actually went for the interviews to actually meet them again and see that they remembered who I was and what I've been doing. Anything you would like to add, guys?
No.
Well, thank you and good luck.
Yes, please have a seat. Oh.
Question time.
I want to ask some questions. And I also want to welcome, so he's representing somebody that's relatively new to the gaming industry. And now I'm going to introduce to you a person that is a veteran in this industry, has been many years, Hrafnkell Óskarsson. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a short discussion, and then you can ask questions if you want. So these guys are now representing the gaming industry. So, but I'm going to ask Hrafnkell first. Can you give us a little bit of your background, how you started, how did you get into the gaming industry in the first place, and which company you have spent the last, 15 years or something?
Okay, so I worked for CCP from 1999 to January this year, and I joined a startup company called Solid Clouds. I actually got into the industry through my youth nerdism by playing a lot of board games and stuff, and through that I met the guys that later founded CCP, Þórólfur Beck and Reynir Haraldsson. And when they started looking for a game designer for the game they had an idea for, they came to me, even if I had at that time no experience in designing computer games. They knew that I was a fanatical gamer and thought that I would be a good candidate. So I was the first game designer hired for CCP and was the only game designer there for about 4 years or something like that. I wrote the entire design bible for EVE Online, and have since the game launched in 2003 worked in various fields at CCP. I was a fiction manager for a time and sort of a game designer on and off. I also went to the United States for a few years to their offices in Atlanta and worked on World of Darkness. Was the game design director there for a little while before I moved back, and then they of course canceled the game after I moved back. So you can blame me if you want. And yeah, I was working happily at CCP. Then I just had this opportunity to hook up with people that I've known for a long time that had recently started a new company working on a new exciting project, and I had always sort of missed the maverick feel of working in a small startup company. It's a completely different experience than from working in a sort of an established company with hundreds of people. And I'm sure Freyr can relate to that. So I wanted to go back to that and live that experience again.
So so you say your background was game enthusiast, playing games. What was your education, your skills when you went to CCP?
Nothing related to computer games whatsoever. I studied history at university, and I actually never managed to complete my degree because CCP basically came in with an offer when I had like a year left or something, and so I decided to postpone my finishing my degree while I sort of indulged myself in this computer game nonsense, as my mother called it. But then 15 years passed, and I thought I would get back and finish my degree anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I just loved games, played every kind of game that I could get my hands on, not just computer games, but also just board games and card games and anything. And I also always liked to sort of play around with the rules. I was always the guy that sort of learned the rules completely and toyed around with variants and modifying stuff and fixing the games that I liked but didn't feel were completely correctly designed. So yeah, that's basically how I entered.
But what would you recommend if anybody wanted to go into the games industry today? What sort of education should they get? How should they prepare? Assuming that they are gamers.
Yeah, I would absolutely have loved to have had some sort of formal education in this field before I started working. I mean, not necessarily learning programming or anything like that, but just, you know, any kind of education in this field is definitely going to be beneficial. What kind of education, of course, depends on what you're aiming to do, but yeah, it's. I mean, I think I got away with entering the industry with basically no formal education in the field, and I think, you know, back in those days that was still possible. I'm not sure that is that possible still today, at least if you want to sort of maximize your chances of being successful. So, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people throughout the years, and it's very noticeable how the people that have had some good education, they tend to just be much better workers in a sense. They know they have better work ethics in many ways. They have just more confidence in themselves and what they can and can't do. And so yeah, I mean, I would absolutely. I mean, I have a 15-year-old son that has expressed some interest in working in computer games in the future, and I'm just telling him, yeah, you need to study that. I mean, you need to go and learn. And that is what I would tell anybody who's interested in entering the field today.
Yeah. Fred, can I ask you, when you started working for CCP, what was your biggest surprise or sort of things that were kind of different from your thought?
Well, it's a lot bigger company than I initially realized. There are so many people there. But what intrigues me the most is how everything is sort of, everything is, even though CCP is at such a huge scale, still grouped into like the smaller manageable units, like small teams that really get to know each other intimately and get to know their tasks and what they're doing very well. So even though starting with a small team in an indie environment, that mentality, in my opinion, is sort of alive within that organization as well.
Anybody have some questions for those gentlemen?
Yeah, what game engine did you use to make Pill?
Oh yeah, Unity. We decided it was simple to use, simple to learn. There was a lot of material online available, so we kind of went for it just for the simplicity's sake.
I would recommend checking if you're using something to import that it works. If you have another program to make stuff, check if it works with Unity first.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Solid Cloud. They're using Unity also.
Yeah, I mean, Unity is just an excellent development kit to use. Both allows for, especially if you want to be doing anything in 3D, Unity is absolutely the way to go. Plus, it allows for very easy sort of cross-platform development if you want to be both, for instance, on a tablet and, you know, on PC or whatever. Then Unity is really, really for that.
Okay. Any more questions? This is your chance to ask people working in this business.
You mentioned that there was a difference between working in an indie company and a bigger one. Could you tell what is the main difference?
I would say there are like two main differences. One is that, I mean, it's really important, especially when you are working on a small project in a small team, that you have sort of a shared vision and a shared passion for what you're doing. And when the team sort of shares that vision, when you feel that everybody's pulling in the same direction, and just everything becomes so much easier. It's almost like become a hive mind where you don't really need to communicate all that much. You just know what needs to be done, and everybody is doing as much as they can to move things forward. And when the team grows, it just becomes harder and harder for the shared vision to be maintained. And at some point, people start to be pulling in different directions, and at that point, it just becomes much harder to sort of get a momentum going in whatever project you're working on. The second thing is sort of more practical in just the communication routes. When the team is small, everybody knows each other, everybody knows each other's weaknesses and strengths, everybody knows what everybody else is doing, so there is no chance of stepping accidentally on somebody's toes and doing something that disrupts their work. And everybody sort of is working very closely together. But when a team grows beyond 20, 30, when it's above that, then you start to need to have this middle management to sort of make sure that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and things are being communicated correctly at the correct times. And that's just that is really hard, and it's something that CCP has struggled with for years to try to come to grips with. And I can agree with what Freyr is saying, is that today at CCP they are doing it much better than they have many times in the past. Especially in the growth period from like 2007 to 2008, when the company basically doubled its size in just a few months. There was just huge growing pains around that for knowing exactly who was doing what, and it was a complete nightmare in many ways. And I hate all that sort of red tape that needs to go into making things work in that kind of environment, even if it's necessary. So I'm really happy to be now working in an environment where don't have to worry so much about the communication overhead or making sure everybody is on the same page and things like that. It sort of just happens naturally when you have a very small team.
Yeah, but there are also benefits of big corporations that are very well organized, because in a small team there are roles that nobody has, sort of get dropped in between. So there are pros and cons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your thoughts, Frey? You have anything to add to this?
Yeah, like you said, the organization of CCP today is very. It has improved from what I've heard, and like you said, the communication overhead can be a bit frustrating at times. Meetings can get tiresome if they don't have an important part to play. It's a delicate balance of trying to manage the work and communication. So, it's a very new environment for me to work in, and still taking it all in.
Okay. More questions?
And just one more thing to add to this, thinking is that it's very tricky once you start to grow up above a certain size to maintain sort of the creative freedom and the creative momentum that is so easy when you're smaller, and so easy for this communication overhead to sort of stifle it. I think, for instance, through my experience at CCP, I mean, I saw basically both ends of the pendulum there. We tried basically a lot of different things to see what would basically work the best. And I think that definitely is a huge topic to sort of cover in a sense, but I think that's more interesting for those interested sort of in the business side of the running a big company.
Yeah, all companies that grow from being a small team up to 200 people, they're going to have a lot of growing pains. I know my company had the same thing, communication overhead, but it all sorts out. But there are different times things look like chaotic, but then people fix that. It's just something that people go through. I want to ask if I would want to follow gaming and I want to get into games and game development, what resources would I go to? What would I do? How would I get my knowledge to just play games, or what do you think?
For me, I play a lot of games.
Yes.
And I read a lot of the online magazines. And I follow a lot of Facebook groups. There are a lot of Facebook groups with indie developers sort of going back and forth with ideas and discussing technologies. And, it's a very fertile sort of grounds to go and brush up on general knowledge about the field.
What magazines, for example?
Well, there's the big ones. There's, PC Gamer has a lot of articles coming out very often, and honestly, I use this thing called StumbleUpon, and I have an interest there, which is gaming, and it takes me between a lot of different sources.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that. I mean, in addition to the Facebook grouping, there is excellent grouping on LinkedIn also. So I would absolutely recommend you get on LinkedIn and join all the development groups there. There are a lot of very good groups there. Some of them are really, really active. A lot of good discussions have been going on. And a good avenue, especially for sort of people that are fairly new to the industry. Twitter as well. Yeah. For the magazines, I would say strictly sort of for the development side, I would really recommend Gamma Sutra. It's been going on for a long time, and they have a lot of articles written usually by people with a lot of experience in the field. And they have some features that are really, really useful for game development. For instance, the post-mortems, which is basically written sort of after a report on development of a game, and where basically they tell you what went right and what went wrong in developing a particular title, and sort of in terms of what is useful, actually the what went wrong column is usually really, really useful, because one thing to note in this industry is that failure or doing mistakes is nothing to be ashamed of. It should be embraced as just as important experience as doing something correctly. You can learn just as much. I mean, the only thing to fear from failure is not learning from it, and you can see this also in for instance, the startup culture in United States, for instance, where like in Silicon Valley. Having, where people basically wear their failures as a badge of honor. You're not really cutting it unless you have like 3 bankrupt companies and you're best or something like that. And I think I really enjoyed the startup sort of culture that is starting to develop here in Iceland in the last few years. And I think sort of on the mentality. This is probably the biggest sort of hurdle for us as Icelanders to overcome, because it's so ingrained in us that failing means you're a loser and a failure and you can't amount to anything, but that's absolutely not true. I mean, if you look for us at CCP, the technical side of making that game come to, come to fruition, a lot of that came from us, which basically was a failed technical company for the most part, and it's the same thing here. I mean, it should be that, even if 9 out of every 10 startup companies fail, it still means that there's a lot of technical knowledge that comes out of the failures.
Yeah, another example is Cocotti that was liquidated. I used to be on the board of directors. Many of the people that work there actually got excellent jobs at other game companies all over Scandinavia. Top jobs. Okay, I think we should try to go to the end of this. If I was stuck if I'm creating a startup and I'm going into the game industry, what platform do you see as an opportunity today? The mobile industries, the mobile game seems to be saturated, free to play, or getting sick of it, sort of breaking down. Where's the opportunity now? Which platform should I use? Go to free to play?
Well, last time I checked, PC was on the rise again.
Yes.
Other than that, it's anybody's guess, I guess.
I mean, I would not develop for console. I mean, especially if it was a startup company with limited resources, then mobile games or PC games are just much easier, both from the standpoint of the size of the project and also just from the standpoint of sort of getting yourself out there. It's much easier to I mean, there are very good channels right now to sort of advertise yourself in a sense, and especially in the PC field, if you manage to, for instance, go through something like Steam. I mean, if you manage to go, I mean, they have very good sort of filters for indie games to come through, and we've seen indie games there that have come through and really flourished, like Banished and other games. So I would say those were the 2 platforms I would absolutely aim for.
Okay, last question. Do you have any advice to gamers that want to be going to gaming industry?
I think my main advice, if you're starting out, is if you're thinking of your first project, pick something that you're passionate about and that you're really interested in playing yourselves. I mean, I'm not saying you have to focus the game development entirely on what you yourselves would like, but that's still much better than trying to figure out what might become popular or what might, make you billionaires or something like that. As Freyr mentioned earlier, making a game is a huge effort. It's real work. It's really, really hard. And if you're really passionate about what you're doing, it's just that much easier to sort of get through all that shit before rather than doing something that you think is gonna be a success. But,
Yeah. Also, just start. Start learning. Start doing. You can plan all you want, but it's not really going to get you very far if you don't actually go out and start playing.
Excellent. I want to thank these gentlemen, Freyr, Hafkell. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. Let's give it. Okay, and now I want to turn the floor to our David. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. Remember me? I was here a few weeks ago. I've been here every time since then as well, just sitting on the side. So I'm here to kind of summarize what we've been talking about over the past few weeks and then go a step further to talk more about what's something that might be useful for you right now. So we started off with game design and prototyping, and this idea that the designer is always in pursuit of some kind of intended effect, the effect they want to have on the player. Ideally, this should be phrased in terms of some kind of player emotion. Then we had a workshop on game engines, where Hanatagni came and told us about all these different kinds of tools that we can use to take some kind of data that we have and turn that into a playable experience. Next, we talked about game art last week with Epilogue. And he showed us that there are so many different free assets that you can get and free tools that you can get to use to make your own assets, if you like, that you can then include in your game. And today I want to talk a little bit about the development process, kind of where you are right now. We already heard some insights from the industry, but I want to talk about testing and submission for this competition in particular. And then, like Blanche said, he'll finish out by talking about the Nordic Game Competition, or the Nordic Game Fund. So let's talk about gameplay testing. Testing is about observing how players interact with the game you give them, and it's usually driven by some specific questions. I'm calling them research questions. So these are things that you would want to know about the game because it's important to you for some reason. So will players find a certain thing to be plausible or believable? If not, why? Or what objectives might they create for themselves to pursue in this environment that you give them? And an important thing about testing is that it should be geared towards giving you actionable information, something that you can learn that then gives you something to do that lets you improve your game. Okay, so like, will players find this to be plausible? You can find out yes or no. Okay, it's not plausible, but this, if not why, that's super important because then that gives you some extra information that you can try to fix things with, right? So, okay, something that you can take an action would be, okay, we should make these objectives. Those objectives are achievable because players seem to want to do that. Or maybe we should add more enemies on this level because it seems to be too easy. Okay, so let's talk more specifically about research questions, things you could want to know. I think there are kind of two kinds. One is about the fundamentals of a user's experience. So like what kinds of objectives will they make? Will the players learn to do this thing? Will they realize that they should interact with these things? So kind of just the basics of getting from one place to another in your game. Is that actually going to work? And then the other thing you can ask about would be the specific elements of your game design. Are they feeling this particular emotion that you want them to feel when they're experiencing a certain dynamic? Or are they using this mechanic to do a certain thing you expected them to do? Or are the dynamics that you wanted actually being enabled by your mechanics? Like this experience you want players to have, the nuts and bolts of your game actually let that happen. And so you kind of have to choose wisely with your research questions because you have a limited amount of resources and time, in particular in your case, to spend getting players to test things. So you really need to focus them on things that are the most important for you to know at this stage. So you can think about a couple different methods for testing. One could be more qualitative. This means you kind of, it's not quantifiable, it's qualitative in the sense that, okay, it could be a free-form response, somebody's just writing a bunch of text down that describes their experience. It could be you observing them while they play, seeing if they laugh at certain points. You can ask them to talk while they're playing, to say what they're thinking at any point in time. So like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing next, you might learn that. And although they're really expressive, you get a lot of information that can be kind of hard to interpret sometimes. I was running a user study once with players in a simulated 3D world where the main character has to walk a bunch and go from one place to another. And one of the comments I got back on my survey was, there should be a horse in this game, or a pony for the character to ride. It's like, okay, but I was asking you what you thought of the story, not like, maybe they thought it was too slow, so they wanted to get to the next place faster. Yeah. Something that's easier to interpret is qualitative or quantitative data. This means numbers, basically. So you can record some kind of structured responses from people, maybe through a survey questionnaire that they fill out when they're done playing. You can maybe measure something about the game while they're playing, like how often they fail at a mission or how many enemies they manage to kill, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's easier to interpret, but you lose a bit of expressiveness. You're getting only kind of little chunks of information here and there, and it might be harder to get a big picture of what's going on. So often these two methods would be combined in the course of testing. I want to highlight survey questionnaires in particular because they're pretty They're not necessarily easy to develop, but they're very quick to kind of knock something together that can probably give you reasonable information. And because they can give you kind of both sides of qualitative and quantitative. So for qualitative, you could ask something like, describe what you did when this happened. For quantitative, we're going to use a Likert scale. I'll show you an example of that in a second. You could ask a question like, or rather, you're making a statement. The player would then need to agree with or disagree with. I felt like I was in control of my character. Then you give them a scale that looks like this. And they choose one of these thoughts to indicate their agreement or disagreement with that statement. Okay? Then you can say, ideally, when you're using this kind of scale, you ask this sort of question in a few different ways. So maybe 4 different statements like this that all sort of get at what it's like to control the character in the game. And then you get one of these values for each of those. The values might be different, right? Because it's hard to guarantee what a person is going to interpret when they read the text of the statement that you've written down. That might vary from one person to the next. So to try to combat against that, you ask the question in a lot of different ways, and then you average over the results. So you can turn each of these thoughts into a number from 1 all the way to 5, and then after someone's filled out the survey, they've done it 4 times, so you've got 4 numbers between 1 and 5, you average those together, and that gives you a bit better reading on whether or not they disagree or agree with the particular statement you're going for. And that's part of, doing that kind of thing is part of trying to avoid bias. And here are some more ways to do this. Bias is something that basically, when your experiments are biased, you can think that you found out something from your data. You can think, okay, 9 out of 10 players seem to agree this a lot of the time, or agree with their statement, that's great. But if there's bias, that could actually be a false statement that you're learning, because something about the experiment is broken. So to try to avoid bias, there are a few things you can do. You can think about your target audience and make sure that your testers are actually coming from that target audience. If it's a game for kids, get kids to play. If you're not sure, maybe if the game is going to be good for kids or not, then you should get more people to play, and that could be your research question, right? Then you're trying to learn about your target audience, just like we heard from before. It's crucial if you're trying to find out, okay, does this piece of the game mechanic work better than that kind of game mechanic? So you have 2 different versions. If that's the case, it's really important for your players to not know which group they're in, right? You have one group play with this version, one group play with that version. If they know which one they're in, then they might be biased just by thinking, oh, this one sounds cooler than the other one, so I'm going to rate that as being more fun, regardless of kind of which one would actually be more fun if you just gave it to a bunch of people. Because you're not going to tell your end players which mechanic they're playing necessarily. Right? So it's important to try to simulate exactly what it would be like for a brand new player once your game is shipped, getting this game in your testing. Right, so when testing 2 variations of mechanic, players who use one variation should not know about the other. And all of your testers should get the same information and instructions from the researcher, right? So if I have 2 groups come in and I give an introduction to these people being really happy and these people being really sad, then I could be affecting their answers just by being different in how I deal with them, right? So it's important to be kind of uniform across all of these people. And often this is done with some kind of script that you write beforehand that specifically or explicitly states what you're going to be telling. Finally, this is an important part of testing, is that you can kind of explain to people once they're done with your test what exactly you were going for. And part of this is an ethical issue, because sometimes you need to deceive players to actually understand better, to answer the question you're trying to ask. So if you deceive players, it's really important to come clean about what you've done along the way. For example, in my research in the past, I've tested storytelling systems that use AI. You try to dynamically decide what should happen next in a video game, okay? The trouble is that I need to test this against a case where it's not there. So you're playing a regular game story. If I told this to players in advance, you're doing this cool AI thing and you guys are playing a regular story, that could cause bias. So I need to tell everyone that they're just playing a story that students made at this university, effectively lying to one half of the group, just so that I can get clean data so that they're not biased by some kind of novelty effect, okay? But at the end, then I explained to everybody what was actually going on. So you can kind of make up for the fact that you had to deceive them a little bit. Okay, so toward helping you guys come up with some plan for you to test your games, I wanted to suggest a few things here. I want to suggest particularly that you make an alpha test plan. Just a short document, a couple pages, that lists research questions, so things you particularly want to know. Also methods, the testing methods you're going to use, like survey questionnaire or others, you can come up with those as part of this. A script for the introduction, so you're treating all of your players in a uniform way. A summary of expected gameplay, and so this will help you in terms of actually coding up the test so that you, in your mind as a tester, you need to know, okay, if I want to test these few things, they actually have to be present in the game in this order, for example. It's good to note what the researcher is supposed to be doing during this test. Are they taking notes? Are they recording with the camera? Are they screen capturing? These kinds of things. Right, you can actually write up your survey questionnaire with an estimate of how long it will take someone to finish it. And then a script for your debriefing, thanking the tester, describing what you were trying to learn, revealing any deception. So here's an example. Research questions. Will players feel fearful while playing? Okay, we're running a horror game. Will they find the sword in the first level? So your methods might be observing the players, having them talk while they're playing, that's think aloud, and filling out a survey when they're done. So for the introduction, we could say, welcome, today we'd like you to play through the first 2 levels of our game. You can use these keys to move around and jump. While playing, I'd like you to say what you're thinking out loud, and when you're done, I'm going to have you fill out a survey, and you can use this laptop to play. And so for the expected gameplay, we're saying, okay, the player is going to start at the spawn point in level 1 and start exploring. They'll find the sword or not, maybe. Trigger the first monster attack based on proximity, and then fight off a bunch of monsters. Then, or they might die and respawn. Finally, the player will reach the stairs up to level 2, and there they'll get attacked immediately as the screen goes black, forcing them to fight blind, and then the researcher ends the gameplay session 1 minute after the screen goes black. So that's just testing these very focused things. This is the experience we expect players to have. Roughly taking about 5 minutes. And the researcher will be observing, listening to the players, taking notes about, do they seem like they're afraid? Are they gasping? Are they yelling? And do they find sort of these things that we're actually trying to learn? So for a questionnaire, we might go to something like this. Yeah, so you can use Google Forms to make these kinds of things. They're really slick and quick to create, and all of the data automatically gets dumped into a Google spreadsheet for you. So it's really kind of nicely put together. So we have these like and stop questions here where we can agree or disagree. Focused, blah, blah, blah. It's easy to scare me. It might be important for you to know if someone is easily scared or not, but that could bias their answers. I really like horror movies. And then have them fill in a bunch of text, and then you can click submit, and I didn't fill out a question, so you can make what's required. It's good. Submit. And then it all goes into a spreadsheet. That's kind of a nice way to aggregate information about players. Okay, script for debriefing, you're thanking the player, explaining what you were trying to find out, and that's basically all in this case. So, I don't think I'll do this right now, but I wanted to have this in the slides anyway for you, to have an exercise to start thinking about what you would want to know about your game and how important it is for you to know that thing. So the idea here would be to have each person in your team write down a few research questions that they think are particularly important. And then the team would go through all of these questions and give a score to each one, or 2 scores to each of them. One is about uncertainty, like how sure or unsure are you about what is going to happen according to that question. 1 would be totally sure, 5 would mean we have no idea. And the other score would be for importance, meaning how heavily does the success of your game depend on you knowing the right answer to this question? 1, okay, it's no big deal, it doesn't really matter. 4, 5 means it's super critical. Once you have these 2 numbers, you can then take the product of them, you multiply them together, and that gives you a sense of the importance of you investigating this thing, right? If you don't know a lot about it, and and it's super important to your game, that should take priority over something that's maybe not such a big deal, right? And so that can let you kind of prioritize, and you can pick the top 3 or 4 and then design a test around those. That's the idea. Okay, here I'm going to hand over to, actually maybe I won't hand over, but I'll have you come up and take questions with me as well, to talk about preparing your submission for this particular competition. So we want a few things from you. One is your game, obviously.
That's impossible.
Being a binary executable dependencies. So this is just like you were to give it to somebody who plays. Don't assume that we can build your projects or anything. We don't want that kind of stuff. We just want an exe and maybe whatever art assets or things that aren't bundled along with it. And right, we're expecting everything you need to run your game in at least one of these platforms. Okay. And if somehow you can't support these things, send us an email to gamecreator@ign.is and try to make arrangements. In the past, we've offered to have people bring in the platform that it can play on. It's not one of these things, and let the judging committee use it for a while. Yeah, please don't include source files and project files. That's not what we want to see. We just want the game itself. And then also, actually, this will be revised a little bit from what I showed in the web form in a second. We want an explanation of how we're supposed to launch and play the game that's somehow confusing. And we also want you to make a gameplay video to put it on YouTube. It's basically just 30 seconds of gameplay, upload it. There's a tool here. There are also instructions on the Game Creator website that you can look at that will help you record these videos. And this is basically both for the judges to be able to see something in case they don't have the platform that they want them to play the game on. And also, we might end up using it for the awards. Okay. So, how to submit? We want you to submit via this web form at gamecreator.iga.is no later than the deadline. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you start uploading your game, like say to Dropbox or something. We want you to give us a Dropbox link, basically, or Google Drive. Start uploading early because this can take a really long time. I did this for the 3-week class that I taught game design development last year at school, and some students started uploading at like 23:45 the night that was due at midnight, and they were still uploading like 2 a.m. Like, please start this early. It's super slow. Right, just a reminder of what we want, and I'm going to switch over to the website to show you what that looks like. Creator. Yeah, okay. So here, this lovely button that's right here now, top of the page. We click on that, and it gets us this web form that describes a whole bunch of stuff for what you're supposed to do. There are fields here for you to enter in. Things like who your team is, description of your project, link to the submission, to the Dropbox link to your YouTube video, and then other comments. So, okay, if you don't know how to make your own video of your software, then here's some instructions you could follow. There's a link to a YouTube video, it's a tutorial. So there's a bunch of stuff there that will hopefully help you through this process. And I recommend kind of trying it out for yourselves. Maybe don't click the submit button. Just make sure you're able to do all the pieces before the deadline, right? Don't start learning all of this stuff right when it's needing to be done. Any questions about submission?
Yeah, can the gameplay video be longer than 30 seconds, or does it have to be?
It can be. We will probably just take a chunk of it if we want to show it bigger. Like so we're not guaranteeing, like if we use the video for the award ceremony, we wouldn't guarantee each and every thing. But yeah, if you want more content, that's okay.
Also, is it possible to submit 2 games?
Per team? Yeah. That's kind of weird. Like, if you don't win on your first game, do you win on your second game? Like, that's being a bit unfair towards all other. So yeah, I think we should actually limit it to 1 game on team. If you want to actually submit another game, just make another team.
Yeah, that would be the way.
The same numbers.
The same numbers. Well, yeah. That's actually a rule that, like, that's a thing we've never had to deal with so far. So
There's a loophole in this.
there's a loophole.
If you have time to do 2 games. Wouldn't it be better to spend it on 1 game and make
That's
that
also a
one
thing.
better?
That's also, that's a word.
Any other questions?
Is it absolutely clear how you submit? Nobody has any doubts.
So nobody is going to be emailing Yowe to ask for help.
2354. Hang on, this doesn't work.
Okay.
All the information is on the website, and of course, if you have any questions that we don't cover, just send us an email. The email is at the website, so everything's pretty accessible.
All right, so I just want to finish up with a few words of wisdom from people in the games industry. These are friends of mine who worked on a few games that you might have heard of. And I specifically went to them and said, like, okay, suppose you were to give advice to people who are making games for a very short amount of time, what would you say to them? And so they said these things. An indie game has to be something very small, very focused, because you only have time to polish that one thing. Not 2 things necessarily, just 1 thing. Right? You need to scope down, simplify, and ship. Ship early and ship often. Get your stuff in front of people as early as possible. Hopefully you've already done this, and iterate. This is why I was talking about testing today. It's super important for you to get people to actually play these things before it goes to the judging committee. Whether you're building it, marketing it, etc., make sure you're always focused on whatever is currently absolutely the most important. And this is what that alpha test plan is meant to try to help out with. Finally, finish it. That is all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Let's get them.
Oh, yeah.
Did you name your presentation the same as I did?
Yeah. I'll close this one.
Right, well, they're figuring it out. I just want to ask a simple question towards all you. How are you guys doing? I mean, with your game?
Almost finished.
Almost finished. It's cool.
We had to slow down a lot.
You have to scroll down.
Yes, we didn't have as much time as we thought we would. These last weeks because of school.
Yeah.
So,
That's a common thing. It's a really common thing that you have to scope down your project. More common than, like, I'm saying it's a common thing, it's more common than that.
We had to rework our game 10 times.
10 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some things didn't work out and we had to create it all over again.
Yeah, he called me and said, we have to throw out all the stuff you have created. And I thought he was just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. You have to throw it all out.
You two? How are you guys doing?
what's to do?
Yeah.
It's also some school at school. So.
That's always the thing.
I think we were awake for like almost 38 hours last week.
Yes. It's not easy.
Oh, it's up. Yep. Okay, so the last thing we want to do today is talk about Nordic Game Development Plan. We thought last year was the last year, but somehow they managed to squeeze out a little bit more money for development plans. The reason why we have this program is that the Icelandic gaming industry is part of this Nordic cooperation. We have been, one of the roles that IGI has done in the past is to try to emphasize partnerships in the Nordic countries, because there's a lot of companies in the Nordic, in Sweden, Helsinki, and Norway, and Denmark, and these have huge opportunities for us. A few years ago, IGI, along with other associations in those countries, founded something called the Nordic Game Institute. It is a regional institute representing these 5 countries: Iceland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And this institute has sort of replaced the game program that was a temporary program that was created a few years ago to inspire people to make video games. So what I want to tell you today, and this is what we want to close with, is that, and this is something that was just sent to me in email, we still need to announce this, and it's not on the webpage yet, so it's not public as far as I can see. So the Nordic Game Development Support for 2050 is going to be like this. They have 1 million Danish kroner allocated in it. So this is shrinking rapidly. It was 3 million last year. But still, it is something, and this has been a very, very good program for the last few years. Many Icelandic companies have had grants from the Nordic Game Development, so I encourage anybody to try to submit. However, there is the likelihood of getting a grant is not very high. You have to have a really, really, really exceptionally, really cool, good game. Everything has to be good because there are so many applications there. Last year we had 180 applications and we granted 8 or 10 or something. Now, the reason I say I sit on the expert group that actually chooses the games, and I can't choose Icelandic games. But I get to say which projects get funded. And to make these restrictions, since this is not a lot of money, there's going to be 5 projects to receive 200,000 Danish kroner each. Okay, if we get 200 applications, how are we going to focus? And the board of directors of NGI have made it clear, given us a mandate, actually, because we recommended something. It has to be creative, quality projects, games also aimed at preschoolers. So that's sort of a restriction. That means the judging committee can throw out games that are not meeting that. But it doesn't mean that the judges have to select only preschoolers, but that's just what the mandate we are giving. We can select anything. If it's a good game, we can select it. So we can, but we take this advice sort of as something that we work with, but we just pick the best game anyway. And you can see it here, or that have a clear foundation in Nordic cultural tradition. This is what the politicians that give us the money want. They want to have this has to be, Nordic cultural traditions. And nothing has been announced yet, but the likely dates are April 1st. We don't know, but usually it is around beginning of April. It will be announced at the end. The grants will be given in May, and there will be an award ceremony in Malmö later in May after the Nordic Game Conference, which is an excellent conference, and I totally recommend it. So this is what I had to say. This is the Nordic Game Development Support Program. And now, just to close, I want to thank people that have been helping on this, David Tui, Yoe, and all the others that have have helped make this game creator work, and also the panelists today, Freyr and Hapkell. Thank you. So with this, I want to close this and wish you a nice weekend. Thank you very much.
So I missed